Hello everyone, Richard Miller, Never Not Here in Australia, and I just had a great talk in I'm going to call it the Shiva ashram, but I guess it's the Shiva school of yoga and meditation. And here I am again, so let's just introduce Devi Ma.
Hi Richard, welcome to the ashram. I love the name of your show, by the way. That's very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works good for Google too, because nobody thinks of Never Not Here.
Yeah.
They think of always here or something like that. And
yeah.
maybe a double negative is not grammatically correct.
It's interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So what did you want to talk about?
It's probably all the same, always the same, I just want to find out the key to life, right? Then didn't the guy in America, Ponce de Leon, he was looking for the fountain of youth, right?
Mm.
And so we're still looking for the fountain of youth 500-600 years later. And
well, that's an interesting question to ask a woman. But it is interesting to think about that because from my point of view, the fountain of youth is the Shakti, the spiritual energy. That's what keeps a person alive and feeling young and present to themselves.
so it's like the life force. We're looking for the life force, and what is...
It's the life force, but it's more than that. It's just not the force that keeps the body alive. It's what you said earlier about the Kundalini energy. As it flows through a person's awareness, as it flows through a person's consciousness. And that feeling of connection, to the self and to the world. That's what keeps a person feeling alive and young and thriving.
Somehow, this, whatever you name it, Kundalini energy, it's here, it's always here. So then when we abstract it and say it's a thing, it's a Kundalini energy, then we're trying to augment it, trying to manage it, trying to unleash it. And
well, it is unleashed we do awaken to it. It is a potential within everyone. But then how come it's more present in some people than others?
yeah, how come we're all individuals and how come we're all unique?
Well,
those are hard questions to answer, right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing that we're all different. How boring would it be if we were all the same? So the variety, the uniqueness of each person and their relationship to themselves and to everything around them is a wonder. It's a wonder, actually. It somehow it proves to me that there is a higher awareness, a higher consciousness operating. I think everyone is proof of that. Because we're all different.
Now, how does that translate to higher?
Well, I think because it's I didn't really understand it until I began to understand, until Swamiji taught me about Kashmir Shaivism. That two things. Within each person is this potential for self-actualization, self-expression, and a connection to whatever is great in consciousness or in God's mind, you could say. That's one way of saying it. And that...
Did you say potential?
Yeah. Well, it's two things. There's a potential, which is asleep in most people, but awakens in the company of a great being. Or a master who's attained or established in a higher state of consciousness. And Baba was a person who was established, and Swamiji's a person who's established. And
we talk about the Sangha also, and we talk about the power in a group, or the like-minded people. Or I've even heard some people say that when Christ reincarnates, he'll reincarnate as a group.
Yes. Well, the Bhagavad Gita says that. Bhagavad Gita says a very interesting thing. It says that the avatars, the great souls, gurus, come through the plea of their devotees, that they take birth from the yearning of their devotees who are suffering. And that yearning for the end of suffering, for liberation from suffering, brings a great being to the planet. And so it's true that we're born as a group, kind of. We're a mandala. This ashram is a mandala of different people playing different roles. But everyone works together to create this space of consciousness where people can awaken and do sadhana and experience the divine energy.
Before, what strikes me, I wanted to say, before we were talking about grace. And so then you are so lucky to find yourself at the center of this mandala. And this life of yours is a miracle.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle to me. When I think about, how I was before awakening, and how did I get here? I felt like I was so bound by my own pain and my own suffering. And so, so miserable. I would look out at the world and say, that's an inert, dead thing out there. How can this be? There has to be more. But who could imagine what that more was? It's like as a friend of Swamiji says, Swami Chaitanananda, he says it's an unimaginable possibility, because you can't imagine how life can be from the point of view of limitation and suffering. You can't imagine. I could not imagine that Shaktipat or Kundalini awakening or Guru's grace existed, because it only existed, it only existed somehow in Jesus' time. That was the only time it existed or could exist.
But yet, even in those times of limitation and pain, you said you had horrible pain and inertness, you were still propelled out to do amazing work and to really even, let's say you were working out of that pain or somehow.
Well, you were
really a participant.
That's right. But what happened to me was that I was very self-destructive as a young woman. Very self-destructive. I was on the path to darkness. There's no doubt. And then something happened where I said, okay, it's over. I had some kind of strength within me to say, I'm stopping this now before, I die. Yeah, or something. And so one night I had a dream. And in the dream, I was conscious, and I woke up and I could hear a bell ringing. And I was like in this other world where everybody was wearing white. And they were sitting on the floor kind of meditating and chanting, which I didn't even know what it was. They were making these sounds, which I now later you realize they were mantras. And in the bell was like a voice that said, all right, change now. Do it now. And from that moment, my whole life began to change. I volunteered at a organization in Vancouver, which is where I'm from, Vancouver, Canada, and got involved with a really good group of people. And each moment of my life began to lead me to the meeting with Swami Muktananda, which was in 1974. I ended up in Ann Arbor. I went to Italy. I lived in Italy for 2 years. Then I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I met Baba, and boom. But it was that decision to change, that I changed from sort of heading towards darkness to wanting to move towards light. And that was a decision that changed the course of my life.
When you say that, I just feel thrilled that, you have such a depth to help people through that step. And I don't know, what is this graduation from self-destructive to life-destructive to life affirmation?
I think
because all the great
I don't
religions
know.
say it, but
Yeah.
we just floss it off and say,
I
well,
think you have to ask for help. I think it's like, all the NA and AA, what do they say? I think they really have the core, can describe the core moment for a person transforming their life, which is to say, I need help. I need help. I need help with my confusion. I need help with my suffering. I need help from God. I need help from whatever. And I think in that moment, the universe, it's interesting because you can't, when blindness is happening, when you can't see the truth or feel the truth or know the truth, but you can simply ask, then the veil somehow separates and opens that crack to grace. And I think that grace somehow, when I said, okay, I say yes to living my life differently. I say yes to that, to the possibility of finding a way to live my life differently.
Can you say yes and then find a crack, or does the crack have to happen
I
in order
don't know.
for there to be a yes?
I don't know. I think the first moment is to want to change. To want to change. To say I need to change. Because if I don't change, I'm going to die.
Well, do you have to carry it that far? In other words, I guess AA always starts out with, you got to say I'm an alcoholic, right?
Right.
And then, I mean,
statement.
even if you really get into most of the Christians and
Yeah.
you want to get baptized and all that stuff, you got to start out with, I'm a miserable sinner. Because otherwise, if you're not a sinner, why do you need Jesus?
Yeah.
And so then Jesus is my only savior.
Mm.
And so then somehow you're right that you got to ask for help, because even the organized institutions say you got to start from the bottom and work up. And AA always talks about the absolute bottom
Yeah. Well, I hit bottom. I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't even a drug addict. I was just contaminated by the emotions. I have powerful, powerful emotions that were negative and turned against me. And so, for me to want to be, the first moment was to say, I want to be free from this. I don't want to feel this way anymore, but I need help. And then help came, and I started to meet a series. The first teacher I met was a therapist who helped me. Then he invited me to Italy, where he trained me in Gestalt therapy. And I was there studying for 2 years and running groups. And then there, I met my husband-to-be. He was from Ann Arbor, and then I met Baba, and then I met Swamiji. So from that moment, I met all these teachers who protected me and showed me a different way of being, which led to yoga, which was the ultimate. And even as a therapist, I was struck by my inability to actually really solve people's suffering. I could put a Band-Aid on it, but how could I solve someone else's? How could I be an instrument of guiding someone else if I couldn't solve my own?
So Gestalt, is that something you're injecting into this ashram?
I use it.
Way?
I use it in some way. I mean, it did, Swamiji, when we first started doing the groups, Swamiji I would use some of that training in the groups, but then it evolved beyond that. And I still go back, in the groups that I lead, I still go back and use some of that, some of the things I learned from that.
Is Gestalt something like acting out some different scenarios and just seeing if they feel right, or what the feeling what
Gestalt was developed by a man named Fritz Perls, who was a German. He studied with Jung. And his premise was that whatever emotion is left over from, painful circumstances, he called it baggage, and that we disown things, and we put them we store them in our unconscious, and that it creates suffering. That's basically what he said. And so
how to reclaim that baggage? You got to go to the baggage reclaim place.
That's right. You have to go to the baggage reclaim place. That's when I had my first experience of the witness in a Gestalt group. probably my first experience of Kundalini in a powerful way, which is that I sat down and, the Gestalt leader asked me how I was feeling, and I closed my eyes and went inside, and I said, I feel split in two, and he said, that's bullshit. And then suddenly I started to hyperventilate. Now I know it was pranayama. So I started to ventilate, and then I was sucked down this like a tube in my awareness, in my consciousness. And I started to relive. I thought I was dying because I'd heard that when you die, all your memories flash before your eyes. And so all my childhood memories and everything that had happened to me up until that day, all the suffering and all the pain and everything, started to arise in my mind. I saw everything. My whole life flashed before me. And then I was aware that behind all that, I was watching it from this still place. And there was this maelstrom of memory arising in me. And then I saw that I was just watching it. And then I came out of it. It lasted for I thought it only lasted for like 10 seconds, but they told me it lasted for about 20 minutes. And I came out of it and I felt completely different. Like this huge, massive block in the form of memory was in the way of something. And I was tingling all over, and I was like,
you just got vacuum cleaned or something.
Yeah,
all that stuff just went whoosh.
I just got,
it all came from because a guy just said your story is worthless.
That's
bullshit,
right.
Bullshit. You're split in two. What are you talking about? You're dodging.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That was my first experience of.
Wow-wee.
Yeah.
And so that you can't teach. I don't know,
you can't teach that. And
you tell everybody that's bullshit and see if it works, right?
That's right. That's right. So, and then a year or two later, I met Baba, and that was it. And then a very similar thing happened when, I took the very first intensive. Baba had told Swamiji when he sent him away, because it's kind of it's an interesting story, kind of how, I don't know if this is what you want or you want to ask me other kinds of questions.
Let's just go for this for a while.
So I'm just talking about my spiritual journey, really. But I lived in Italy, and then I went to America, and I did some tours in America teaching, doing workshops and things. And then I landed in Ann Arbor, which is where Swamiji had the ashram, and he had been sent away. And I picked up the newspaper one morning, and I read this in the newspaper. I read, meditate on yourself, worship yourself, love yourself, understand yourself. God dwells within you as you. I read that, and I looked, and I thought, God, that's an amazing message. What is that? And then my husband came home. He was going to grad school at U of M, and he said, we've been invited to meet a Swami. I said, what's a Swami? Ripley's Believe It or Not, the guy lying on nails, right? And he said, do you want to go? And I said, sure, why not? So a few days later, we pull up outside an old fraternity house, and it's got Siddha Yoga Dham written in big black letters across the top of it. And we walk in, and it's a room not much bigger than this room. And I look over from the doorway over there to my left, and there's this man in orange, all dressed in orange, sitting on a two-seater couch, and he's speaking, and he's apparently answering questions. And so I walk in and sit down, and as we sit down, our eyes meet, and I felt this welcome. So I sit down, and that's the last thing I remember until I don't know how much time passes, and suddenly I feel this on my shoulder, and it's my husband. We have to leave. We have to go to the airport to pick up my Gestalt teacher who's coming for some workshops. And so I stand up and we walk out, and I say, God, I don't know what it is, but that man has something, because I touched a place so deep within me, and it was like sleep. I mean, I thought I had fallen asleep, but it was different, because I felt like this connection to something. I couldn't have described it if you had asked me, but I knew it was special. And so that's why I said that to him. And then through a series of synchronicities, we were pulled back there when a few months later, when Swamiji had wanted to find someone to run a, quote, communication group in the ashram, and found I was counseling one of the people who lived in that ashram, and they had told him about me, and they brought me in to run this group, and that was it. They couldn't pay me, so I said I'd like to learn to meditate, and so I took an intensive. And it was that intensive that I again had the experience of Kundalini, a massive experience which radically altered everything in my life. So in one moment, which was the moment when Swamiji goes around and he blesses people with a wand of peacock feathers, that this explosion of electricity happened within me, where I just felt the most incredible sense of aliveness and connection to everything. Everything was moving. If I opened my eyes and looked out at the world, it was all vibrating with what they call chitti, or consciousness. And the world never looked dead again after that. In fact, it's always looks alive to me now. And, that experience waned, but something stayed. Some sense of self has always been with me since then.
So when we talk to so many people, and so many people have amazing stories, maybe not this amazing, but those when you talk about synchronicity, and when you'd say one thing after another just struck you so rock solid, like, oof, just not bowled you over. And then without really trying, without any kind of trying, or any kind of work toward it, or any visualization, or anything. That's right.
I was an empty cup. I was completely empty. I had no, I didn't know I was a seeker. Now I know that I was looking for the end of my pain, but I could never have put it in the context of, guru or yoga or meditation. I didn't know what any of those things were. And I think that I'm very fortunate, actually, that I didn't have, a concept, a preconception of what it was going to look like. I had always hoped that if God existed, that it would be magical. God would be magical, because there was no magic in my life. There was no magic in my, you know what I mean? That there would be.
So you said I had always hoped, so then that was your prayer. So in some way you would set it up by that prayer, right?
That's right. Well, as a child I had said that.
Well, that's even better.
Yeah. Because, the one time I went to church when I was a child, a friend of mine, a neighbor, her parents were very religious. And they asked me if I wanted to go to church with them, because my parents didn't go to church. I asked my mother what God was, and she said God hates. I think she said God hates Catholics. No, she said your grandmother is an orange woman and they hate Catholics. That's what she told me when I said, "What is God?" I didn't know what either. I didn't know what an orange woman was, and I didn't know really what a Catholic was.
Well, what is that referred to? Irish, the oranges in
the Protestants, radical Protestants, or Presbyterians.
Yeah.
And so I went to church with this family, and in the church, when we walked into the church, they took us into. We weren't allowed to stay with the adults in the church, the formal church. They ushered us into, Sunday school, and the Sunday school teacher stands up and starts to give a lecture and says, starts talking about sin. Okay, and and how children are sinful, and all. I don't know even what church it was, okay? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. You know, how can children be sinful? That was my thing, you know. I thought, there ain't no God here. And that's when I looked out the window and I thought, if God exists, God will be magical.
Wow. That's an amazing knowing. There ain't no God here. And then all the adults are saying, no, this is church. This is where God is, actually. It's God only here.
Because
and they're saying the opposite.
Yeah, I'm an interesting, because I think that I've always sort of, and sometimes to my detriment, okay, I have to say that following your feeling can be, you know, destructive too. But I think that I've always been kind of a person who had a sense of my own feeling, that I trusted it. You know, and I acknowledged that her words, you know, had a bad feeling. And how could that be true if it felt so wrong? How can children be sinners? How can people all be sinners? You know, that didn't make sense to me.
Yet out of that basis, which was very, you know, you trusted your own feelings.
Yeah,
somehow,
I trusted my own feeling.
As a teenager or somewhere along the line, you said you got into a very destructive. Well, how did that happen? That you know, out of that basis where you trusted yourself, you totally had trusted your own feeling, and then there was some kind of a translation that brought you into self-destruction, and somehow is that teenage or some kind
teenage rebellion, really?
Rebellion or some kind
just
of a process
rebellion
of
and anger. I was
disgusted
very
with
angered.
the world, or
all of that.
Too much hypocrisy.
All of that. Yeah, all of that. I can remember. Oh, when Kennedy was shot.
Oh my!
That had a terrible effect on me, for some reason, because I felt, and then, you know, Martin Luther King, and then, you know, Bobby Kennedy, and all of that, and I had I guess, I mean, if I look back, this is all in hindsight, you know, but it hit me so hard that, because you know, to a young girl, I was like 14 or 15 at the time when he was shot. But I think that from a young girl's perspective, he seemed like a hero. You know, he seemed like somebody who cared about the world and wanted
I think he was a hero for all of us, really. You know, he was like a new breath of fresh air, and somebody that was going to take a fresh look and all that stuff.
That's right.
It was our hope.
Yeah.
And when our hope is dashed, and
of
course he had us in war too.
And I was so angry about that. I was really angry about it, you know. And then Martin Luther King, and that was another one, you know. And so this anger just turned into this kind of violence. And also, I was raised in an environment where there was mental illness in my family, and we didn't know it at the time. I have 3 siblings who are bipolar, okay? And there was a lot of hysteria and confusion and, you know, strangeness in my family. And so nobody ever really talked about it.
How did it work that you didn't buy into that, and that you didn't mimic that kind of behavior?
I don't know. Well, I did maybe. You know, when I went off the rails, when I started to go off the rails and experiment with, you know, it was the 60s, so, you know, there was drug, sex, and rock and roll, but never to extreme with me, never extreme. I never did hard drugs. But, you know, I think that it did affect me. And, you know, my parents never fought in front of one another. I mean, I come from my family life was stable via my mother. But I just think that it just was this wanting to get out of, because there was a subtle currents of you know, confusion and suffering in my home, and there was no communication. I mean, this is common, you know, it's not an uncommon, but there was no alcoholism. My parents didn't even smoke, you know, but there was this mental illness in my family. You could call
really,
it
there's no communication in all of society, right?
No.
We can't even talk to our politicians. They sure don't talk to us. The news media filters everything into jargon and into abstraction, you know, like diversions. I mean, there is absolutely no communication between human beings on the surface.
No. But I had imagined, you know, as a young girl growing up, you imagine that other places are different. other households are different. So, but I think that growing up in an environment where there was this much, because there were 6 children and 3 of them were bipolar. And so, that is an environment in which everything is kind of unstable at a certain level, because, bipolars,
they shoot off.
They shoot
they're
off.
Electric,
they're depressed, and then they're off the planet,
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, but later we realized, that when they started talking about manic depression, then I realized, what I was raised in. But also,
what's your insight into that? Because like bipolar, because like energy, we usually say that energy is kind of like a fundamental, but really this energy is just pretty wobbly. It's going all over the place.
Yeah, it's going. Well, I actually have an understanding about it, because my sister, who is one of the 3, who was about 8 years older than me, she when we became established in Australia, she was impossible. She was on medication her whole life. She would think she was Jesus the one minute and then the devil the next, and then she would drive herself off cliffs, and didn't die, and she'd break into government houses looking for papers that were there for her conspiracy theories. So finally they got her on medication, okay, and she took her medication religiously. And she was rare in that, she wasn't an actress, because a lot of actors and actresses are bipolar, and it seems like a good arena for them to put that energy, because they're very creative and very talented, a lot of them. So the last 10 years of her life, she would come out here and do the Shiva process. And by doing self-inquiry, she learned to bring that energy, because they project all that energy outwardly. They send it out. They get intoxicated with their own thoughts, and then they want to send it out there into the world. They believe everything they think. So she learned to take it back inside. And the one thing Swamiji always used to say to her, her name was Heather, he'd say, "Heather, don't be profound." Because everything had so much meaning in it. And through meditation, she became more balanced. And she healed all of her relationships. Because, they're very difficult to live with, and they hurt people when they're in their manic phases and when they're in their depressed phases. And so she had a daughter. She healed her relationship with her daughter. She was always terribly jealous of my eldest sister, who had a very deep relationship with our mother, and she healed those relationships. And she healed her relationship with her mother, our mother. And so, unfortunately, she had lung cancer and passed away here. But she radically transformed by taking that energy inward and not projecting it outward.
So she was healed.
She was healed.
That was a healing, You call it self-inquiry, but it could just be some kind of a curiosity of like, what's going on here? Just looking,
That's right. Well, meditation,
Right.
But exploring her inner world, like taking it inside rather than always dissociating, because bipolar dissociates.
So maybe one thing that's profound is when Swamiji said, "Don't be profound,"
That's right.
And really that often we talk about like playfulness is really a portal to right here and now, because there's no agenda in it.
That's right.
And so we're always talking about, life is here and now and be in the now. And so then playfulness, although some ashrams and some yogis are probably very serious and not very playful. But
very serious.
So
as you can see, Swamiji, there's always a party. Wherever he goes, there's always fun.
Yeah.
He makes spirituality fun, and that's natural to him. It's not something he has to make an effort at. It comes easily to him through his bliss.
That's it. He's just playing at it, and then he's saying, "Hey, playfulness is the portal to being here and now, and to being who you are."
That's right.
And so then get over it.
That's right.
Get over your profundity.
Well, you have to get over yourself. That's for sure. You have to get over yourself, and be present to yourself as you are now, in each moment. because it's memory. I think memory plays a big part in a person's suffering. You know, if you take away memory, then
that's everything.
It's everything.
You don't even have a preconception without memory.
No.
No, memory is everything.
Everything.
Memory to me is even time. Because without
That's
time,
right.
without memory, where would a tree doesn't know that it was yesterday?
No.
He doesn't know I had more leaves yesterday. They must be falling off.
That's right.
He doesn't have any time.
That's right. So what is that? How do you get rid of memory? Well, you just be present.
Well, you don't really get rid of it. You just don't put your attention on it
That's
so
right.
much. And you play with it and say it's not important. And it's
Yeah.
not that, okay, here's one for you. Like drama. You were talking about actors and actresses. Drama is seriousness, or like profundity, or like drama is all memory based, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then there's no drama in playfulness.
No, but...
or is there?
Right. Well, there could be, but dramas always arise. When you live with people, stuff happens, right? People are going through, as the Buddha said, birth, life, disease, death, there's always a drama. But, I think that I was a person who had a lot of desire, and it when it was frustrating.
So then you had a lot of drama, right?
I had a lot of drama. And I think that I used to take it so seriously. I used to take everything I felt. This maybe men take what they think more seriously than what they feel. I don't know. It could be a female thing. But I took all my feelings, as the absolute truth. What I felt had to be true.
Yeah.
Had to be.
That's a total key, because we can move thoughts around and say, well, maybe this one could shift for that one and stuff, but the feeling somehow.
Very hard.
Yeah, we think, oh my God, I'll fight for this, to get away from this feeling. Probably most of them were fighting to get away from. That's more important than fighting to get toward any.
Yeah. But then I had to realize that just because I felt something didn't make it an absolute truth. It could be true for me in the moment, but it didn't mean it was an absolute. So I had to learn how to, temper my emotions and not sort of continually speak out of them when they were, when I was angry or afraid or hurt. That it's better to just observe them and see what they are really, because always if it's negative emotion, there's something underneath. And so I had to be, but of course, I had to learn to name feeling. Being able to name feeling is a huge step forward, because not everybody can do that. I couldn't do it. I had to learn. That's one thing that Gestalt taught me, was how to name my feelings, because I used to think that I never got angry.
So that was just life, that is very dramatic and serious, and
yeah.
Other people might call it angry, but it's not. It's just what is here, right?
Well, it's what is, but what is being fueled by some negative emotion, and so if you want to stop the drama, you have to stop fueling it.
So underneath an anger is always a frustration, right? Because you can't actualize what you're trying to actualize, and finally you're fed up and just
right.
You go ballistic, right? And
right.
So underneath that frustration is probably a sadness, because you're trying to change something, right? And so then you're sad, there's a sadness. And then underneath that, there's kind of like a helplessness, right? These are the different levels that you are typically...
That's right.
You feel like I can't do anything. I'm helpless. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to live,
But yeah, that's right. And meditation has taught me not to follow that, not to put all my faith in what I feel, but to measure it with a kind of wisdom or understanding, to always look for the understanding that's going to calm my feeling, look for wisdom that's going to calm my emotions.
So in other words, move your life out of anxiety-based. So, because we could call all those emotions some kind of an anxiety, right? Some kind of a tightness or contraction.
That's right.
And then you could maybe it's hard. You can't really just go out and say, okay, I'm gonna wipe the slate clean. But you could just say some things like, okay, I'm not going to move out of an anxiety motivation.
Yeah.
And then the only thing you could probably do is just to be still at that time. I'm still anxious, so I'm not going to make a decision
That's
now.
right. That's right.
Or I'm not going to throw this off on the other right now. I can feel that there's a big buzz here, and
That's right. And so living with 40 people, there's opportunities to get upset all the time.
Really.
Oh, of course.
So far, I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I'm loving every twist. Every twist and
Yeah,
turn.
but I mean, if you lived here permanently,
Yeah.
you would see that the guy plays the music too loud next door, or he slams the door when he goes to the toilet in the middle of the night, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's the stuff of life, that
Right.
that sort of there's heaps of opportunities to get upset. So what is the job? And the interesting thing about living with a guru, living with a master, is that they have a demand on them. Baba had a demand that came from him, a demand on each of the students that live within the in the guru's home, and Baba's demand was that you do the discipline and realize the self. That was the demand on everyone.
So the
that
discipline was
there.
like the sadhana, like waking up in the morning.
That's right.
Going,
Doing the practices.
Getting
Exactly.
into puja, then getting to meditation. And
That's right.
Then from breakfast to go into sadhana, clean the wash. Everyone breaks up and does their chores. And so many ashrams are really built around just continuous activity, right? A whole
Yes.
schedule. It's just like,
And hopefully
this structure, this huge structure.
dulls the negative tendency of the mind, and the mind moves towards a higher possibility.
So there's two kind of people. Some hate structure, and in the end they have to blast out. They can't stand it anymore. And others somehow, they don't have to think anymore because the structure is just there. And then if you rely on the structure, your mind can stop, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works. And then by doing, because the Shakti is awakened and alive in the gurus of this tradition. That Shakti, you learn to follow that Shakti and not the tendencies of a negative mind. And Swamiji's demand is the same, and yet it manifests differently, which is that when people go to him, okay, and I'm this is kind of a continuing story about me learning to deal with my negative emotion, because his demand is that you come in an open, loving state.
So do you have to fake it?
You can't fake it. That's the thing.
No, but I mean, let's say I don't have that right now. I'm screaming inside of my head.
Yeah, well, you it's.
And
Well,
I feel it closed down, and I want to hide in my room, and I got to show up to sadhana, and I got.
That's
and so
right.
then how do I translate that into open and loving?
Well, you how would you?
God, I wouldn't. I don't know. I would scream, I guess.
Well, that's why we meditate and we do inquiry, because we first look at transforming it within ourselves. That's the demand.
Some gurus did do screaming, like Osho had that dynamic meditation where you scream your lungs out.
Yeah. I mean, I did that in Gestalt. We did all that kind of psychodrama and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's a possibility. And I mean, sometimes it's necessary that somebody go to the beach and scream at the world, have a cathart rolling and on the floor or something, getting rid of painful memories, you could say. But the demand here on everyone is to stay in a good state.
Sometimes I don't trust that, because I'm kind of like that, because in a way I can diffuse negative things and saying, well, that's just thought-based and it comes from here and comes from there. I give a few explanations, and then I'm not so sure whether I just resolve it or solve it, or if I just stuff it in a certain way by dismissing it.
Well,
So
whatever you stuff is going to...
I don't trust myself,
Yeah, but it's going to come up eventually.
Okay, well, is stuffing the same as dismissing? Because
no, it's not
I know
dismissing.
I dismiss it.
No, it's not dismissing. It's actually being aware of contraction in the moment. Aware of it's sort of keeping a focus on both, a focus on the inner and then an awareness of the outer at the same time. and you know, being able to move between those two and hold that state without allowing the contraction to run the moment.
But the contraction's still there, right?
It can be there. Yeah, it can be there, but you're not allowing it to run the moment.
Okay, now it's not running the moment in a way, because somehow it's been dismissed or diffused, or somehow it's seen through, right?
It's seen through,
But
yeah.
then, if you look at it, I'm still grumpy, you know? I'm not grumpy and pissed off at anyone. I don't direct it toward anyone. But let's say I'm not celebrating life, you know?
Okay,
That
well,
joy
that's all
is
right.
not really flowing, right?
Yeah.
And so then something about it is false, right?
Well, no, it's just what it is. Why is it false? It's just what it is in the moment. It's who you are in the moment.
It's kind of like what you see is what you... I mean, you know, if you have a certain inner attitude, won't that reflect outside? Almost invariably? Let's say
yeah, okay, but...
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't wake up every morning saying I have to be in a good mood. You know.
I don't either, but I'm just curious why I'm not, you know. I'm not
Oh, okay.
necessarily
Well,
in a
then
bad
you
mood,
can-
but I'm just kind of like this
You can
neutral
always
lump.
find out. You can always find out why not. You can find out by just sitting down and asking yourself, what's going on here? It's simple. But I mean, that's the demand, to always ask what's going on here. You know?
Yeah. Well, we did that last night in the Shiva process, you know, and I felt pretty open in some chakras and kind of like absent in another. And I didn't really feel pressure of anything, and I didn't have a lot of thoughts. I felt kind of like in a clear space, but yet I didn't feel like at the end of the day I could feel more lit, you know, and like there was a brighter burning.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like more celebration and more joy. But in the beginning, I was just kind of feeling this neutral, but it wasn't foreboding in any way.
Yeah. So you had what we would call an upward shift.
Yeah, I had an upward shift.
Yeah. And so there's certain things that we do which create more of an expansion inside. So you follow that. You follow the expansion and not the contraction. So like doing this work that you do, you know, you have the website and you do this work and you do these interviews, and that enlivens you, doesn't it?
Certainly does.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because it's like an excuse where I can meet people.
Yeah, it's great, and it's great. You're very well suited to it, you know, just the way you are. And so that you follow that, and there are other things, you know, in your life outside of this that where you will find the thread of that energy, and you'll want to follow that.
Yeah, just follow
So
that
it's
thread of that
as
energy, right?
Joseph Chilton Pierce said, you know, follow your bliss. This doing this makes you feel blissful.
Right. It does.
Yeah.
Well, blissful, or just somehow it just feels. I feel a service. I feel like I'm giving back. I don't have any embarrassment that I'm not giving back, or that I'm not doing enough in the world. I mean, I'm putting all this stuff in a way up on a table without trying to preach it, or without trying to say you better do this or you ought to do that. But I'm just saying, oh, look at this. Look what I found over here.
Well, you're doing what you can do. You know,
Yeah.
for everyone to discover that's a great gift, to discover what you can do. You know, I mean, I had to come to understand that what I can do is live in an ashram. I can live in an ashram, but I can't live in an apartment or a house, you know, with one other person or two other people. But I can live in an ashram.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it's like a kind of self-acceptance to know what you can do. And that when you find that, when you discover that and accept that, then that thread of bliss is present. Because you're doing your dharma, you know, you're doing your what the higher self or what your destiny or whatever is asking of you. And to find that is a great gift and a great blessing. And so you have to follow that.
That's, you know, you hit it right on the head, because that's really what keeps me going, is because this is so easy for me, you know, both the technical part and then just sitting here speaking with you. It just seems effortless, really.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation, aren't we? We're just
Right.
actually talking to each other.
Right.
Yeah, and you're really good at that. You are.
Sometimes I doubt, and I wonder if I talk too much because I'm overcompensating for some kind of thing.
Well, I think it's good because, I mean, I
whatever's
watch
the
you.
cause, right?
Well, probably, maybe in some context, but not in this one, because I think you stir people's, you know, thinking process. You stir them. You create a space where people can speak to you. I don't think you exclude.
No, but I want to kind of roll over certain things. Like I want to roll over the, what should I call it? The tried and true explanations, the ones that are kind of that too much traditional. And I want to kind of crack it and say, well, could anything new come in here? And could there be a broader footprint of wisdom in the world?
Well, I don't know if there can be a broader wisdom, okay? Because I think all the wisdom or footprint, but
footprint of the wisdom.
Let me just say though, I think that there's always an articulation of whatever wisdom is there. You can speak to different audiences and articulate it and say it in a way that certain groups can hear it. So there isn't one articulation that's going to be accepted by the whole.
That's exactly what I say, is like the way it's articulated now is so limited who can receive it, right? You have to have almost an Eastern spiritual background.
Yeah.
And what about, there's so many other places on the earth that really need to be de-stressed.
My favorite game as a child was hide and seek. I used to love that game. And I mean, yoga and meditation is nothing but that. It's a game of hide and seek where we hide things from ourselves and then we discover them and we look for them and then we find them and then we're constantly moving from hiding, concealing things from ourselves and then discovering them. Concealing grace, discovering grace. Concealing wisdom, discovering wisdom. Concealing bliss, discovering.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, but does it really work? In other words, you get new hiding places, or are they the same ones that we just use over and over again?
So what?
Oh yeah.
As long as the game's going on and there's concealment. In Shaivism, Swami, he said Shiva has these 5 processes of creation, being one of them. Creation, sustenance, and what they call destruction. I like to think of destruction as transformation or change.
Call it recycling. I like
that. Or
recycling,
yeah. And then there's concealment and grace. So these 5 processes, it's not like we can stop them. You want to try and stop, right? And just be in grace all the time. But you can't, because these processes are happening all the time and you can't stop it.
Even if we can see the mechanism, maybe we could kind of lean to the grace side more than the concealment side, right?
But you do.
Concealment has a utility, right? Concealment has a utility, but grace has no use at all whatsoever. So then we're using concealment for some reason that's come up from the bottom, from the collective or from the past or something.
Yeah, whatever.
So they're quite different, right? Because it's a whole different context.
Yeah, but they go together,
Yeah.
They go together. Grace and concealment are like yin and yang. They're the dark and the light. You can't have one without the other. It's just the play.
We're just saying that grace is the uncovering of the concealment, or the discovery of it, the inquiry and the discovery.
Yeah.
But, maybe grace is just overall all 5, and that really, I don't know. Of course, Shiva's got already those 5. I can't really alter them, right? I have to just keep in that context.
It's always being churned out, And yes, I mean, ideally, you could say that grace, we should all be always in a state of grace. And I think we are always
we have to be, because like we were saying before, grace is not capricious. So it has to be there. It's just there. Our opening to it that's on and off.
Yeah, but I mean, things happen in life that, we sometimes think that grace has left us, because there are things in life that shock us, no matter what our attainment, no matter what happens. I mean,
there's always another level.
There's always another level.
We can let some more pain in, or let some more frustration in, or let some more perplexity in, and we say, oh my God, that too.
Yeah, there can be sudden death, or the notice of a terminal illness, or whatever. All the things to do with the body, which can sometimes,
The body and the family, right? The body.
Exactly, the body and the family.
That's kind of like the body.
That's right.
The body politic, the body. What do you call it? The body of a relationship.
Yeah.
So what are the 5 again? Creation is the first, right?
Creation, sustenance.
Sustenance, of course, yeah.
And destruction, or
recycling.
Recycling, yeah. And then concealment and grace.
So then concealment and grace should become before recycling, right? Or do you have to have them in a certain order?
Well, I think I I don't know how they all, but I
Yeah.
mean, you know, just as they say, you know, the Shaivism says that Shiva, absolute consciousness, is performing these five actions all the time. So we too, as individuals, perform those 5 actions all the time.
In a way, concealment is one of the first, you know, maybe even before creation or just after creation. Creation, concealment, and then sustenance, and then somehow gradual uncovering or
Yeah.
the grace of it all, and then recycling, right? Concealment, because we're concealed before we were born, right?
I don't know. I have no memory.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we live between these 2 infinities, because I have no memory of what I was before I was born, or even, you know, my first memory. Where was I before that first memory? And then we're staring into another, you know, which is the future. So we stand between these 2, the past and the future, in a seamless, eternal moment, really, when we get present to it.
Right. Yeah, that's what it seems like, you know, we're
Yeah.
between the past and the future, but really we're not, right? Because then you really realize that I've never been to the past and I've never been to the future. So there's no sustenance there. There's no substance there.
No, it's either
just a
memory or
thought.
fantasy.
They're all thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to give them a different category than just being here now. Whatever that category might be. You could call it unreal, or you could call it illusion, or you could call it just category 2. It's the B. It's the B life. We're in the A life now.
Yeah. But really, I mean, you know, the thing that seems the most real is this moment. You know, there's nothing outside of this moment, really.
No, yeah, that's almost a thought, because those that live just in thoughts, there's nothing really very interesting about this moment. You know, the only interesting things are the story around it. And this moment, we're just sitting.
Yeah. But there's also a feeling to it. It's not just thought.
Yeah, no, where there's a
I'm
feeling
having
to
an
it.
experience.
Yeah,
I can
definitely
feel
there's
my
a feeling to
experience
it.
of this moment. So
Yeah.
it has 2 things. There's conversation, and there's this experience of the moment.
Yeah.
So
And it's best to say maybe unexplained feeling or unexplained experience, you know, because then that is like our attention's fully on it that way. If we're explaining it, then our attention is 50-50, you know, we're half on the explanation and half on the actual
But
it of it.
see, I feel the presence of the divine in this moment. Because if I didn't feel the presence of the divine, I wouldn't be able to speak to you.
Where else would it be? The divine would have to be in this moment.
It has to be.
It ain't going to be anywhere else. It's only going to be here and now. Right.
All right.
Yeah. But not, you know, I read that, you know, I hear that and I go for that, but I don't go for it as a specialness, you know, like the divine as opposed to the non-divine. I don't think there is any non-divines around, you know.
Not in this moment.
Not in this moment.
No.
So it's actually so simple. That's just it.
Well,
This
if you
is
can
it.
hold your attention to it, yeah. It's
Yeah.
very simple.
Well, I mean, is it worthwhile trying to see what the temptation is to get your attention out of here?
Sure. You want to sacrifice, you know, your state. You can be tempted by all kinds of things.
Well, how does it work, though? Why do those temptations have any power?
Well, because they're temptations.
Yeah.
They're seductive. That's how they have power. We all love to be seduced. Come on. That's part of the sport, you know, of living. You know,
That's the
we
concealment. We're working the concealment
that's
part,
right.
you
We
know,
wanna
to say,
play.
look, come
We wanna
on, help
play
me
with
with this
fire.
concealment. I can't do it by myself.
Well, that's right. You know, we want to play with fire and see what it's like to get burned and then find ourselves again. You know, it happens. I mean, how you know, Shiva in his perfect state, his perfect bliss, his perfect harmony, his perfect union, decides, you know, he's going to create many, give himself. He gives himself. Right? And then the world is created. Oops. He was tempted by the thought, who am I?
Right.
Or let me see myself, you know?
Let a whole bunch of people say this, who am I thing. So then that's cool. Shiva gives himself. So then how do we reflect that? How do we give ourselves?
Well, we give ourselves too, don't we? We give ourselves all the time to everything, to our, our people we love, to our families, to our work.
Maybe that's just a natural movement. We're actually a giving. That we are the verb giving, and the only thing we really do is to withhold ourselves. That's our capacity. But if we let off of it, we're a natural verb giving.
Yeah, I think that's good. I like to say there's an impulse to become. We want to become. I mean, from the first moment, as a young baby, we want to walk, don't we? Then we want to run. Then we want to do this. Then we want to do that. We want to become.
It's total exploration as a baby, right?
Yeah.
We want to push the boundaries.
But I think it's deeper than that. I think it is this inherent thing of becoming. What are we becoming truly? Hopefully we're becoming the self, or becoming Shiva, or returning to that state of oneness. That's really what we want to become. But along the way, we get diverted into these, other things. We want to become whatever, a doctor, a lawyer, a carpenter.
More of those temptations, right?
Well, they're temptations, but I mean,
it's an image, and we create a story around. Hey, I can create a story around this.
Yeah, I can become this, and then I'll be happy, or I can become that, and I'll be happy. But really, what we want to become is we want to become ourselves. We want to feel that sense of completeness and integration in ourselves. Which is similar, I think, to the experience that Shiva has, in that moment. And then, from that, we live a life of integration and wholeness and
well, then, in
compassion.
that sense, the whole search is spurned, and the foundation of it is on insufficiency, because we want to become something. So then we feel like, okay, I'm insufficient. I got to become. I mean, is it possible to be something and then just live a life out of that?
Well, I think it must be, yeah. I mean, I think the saints do, don't they? The saints and sages that have gone before us. I mean, I think they live in that state. They've become, they embody the Upanishads, or they embody the teachings of all the great scriptures, of that state of realization. And then the life, the thing is, life, I always believe that life has to come, our lives, our careers, our relationships, everything has to come from the self, not from some concept we have about how we think our life should be, or the person we ought to marry, or this person or that person. That it has to evolve out of a sense of beingness. And then the choices we make and the decisions we make are based in that sense of selfhood, not out of a desperation or fear or some kind of desire that is painful.
Even worse than desperation or fear is just like the last resort, the worst of two evils, the best of two bad situations.
That's right.
If you're saying something like that, then our education system is totally deficient. Totally wrong, because everybody's just coming out of concepts of what should I be? I could be this.
Well,
and they're all trying to become too.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And in Australia, they have an incredible emphasis on that a person should know what they want to be when they're in year 11. How can a person know what they want to be in year 11?
I don't know yet.
Exactly.
What they want to be, right?
What do you want to be when you grow up? And you have to know, because...
Well, that used to be, that comes out of an older time when things were more stable and you could have one career. But now, probably, we all know that we've had 5 or 6 careers, so that children will probably have 10 or 15.
Yeah. Yeah. And it scares them. It's a terrible pressure for teenagers to have that on them.
They've got really a challenge that we've never had, The young people have to run this world someday, and it seems to be a wreck.
It does, but then, my grandmother thought my generation was lost.
No, it's way faster now, I'm sure.
I know, but
I saw those things.
Though, Richard, I think that actually each generation is born with the skills to handle the culture they're born into. So it's there as a potential. Like, I was headed on the path of destruction, right? But then I had some skill that turned me around. And I think that each generation is born with the skills to handle whatever situation or circumstance they're born into culturally.
So in one way, we need to really trust the younger generation.
We need to trust
because
them.
we have
Yeah.
to say
Well,
that
we
know
trust-
your skill is in there.
That's right.
And we have to inspire them to let that skill out,
Yeah,
and to
to help
find it
them
as
discover.
a being, not as a
That's right.
concept.
And to help them discover their relationship to the culture the way it is, as they mature and grow. What is their real relationship to it? And because, it's evolving so quickly. Technology is creating all kinds of possibilities for people.
You guys got to make a school.
But we are a school. And
but for kids too?
No, but we have a lot of teachers, and slowly, where we can, they begin to.
So you implant the ideas through teachers, and that gets into other schools.
Yeah, and we do a lot of work in schools too. We go out. We're often invited to go to schools and do programs and things. So it's happening. This wisdom is coming into the school system a lot. Not just this wisdom from this ashram, but Buddhist ideas of insight and
Right.
Yeah, it's.
Well,
it's
I guess there's
entering
a
the
lot of
culture.
active schools like Steiner schools and like
Yeah,
other alternative schools that are pretty active in Australia.
yeah.
So
It's entering the culture powerfully.
Mhm.
I keep thinking about the future. I think in 100 years, if I was born 100 years from now, because when I was born, when I was in my late teens, there were no yoga studios in Vancouver. Nothing. So I think, in 100 years, if I'm reborn, there's going to be yoga studios everywhere, right? The possibility for...
We have no idea. I think it's going to have to change quicker than that, and more radically. And I don't think in 20 years we could really even have a clue of an idea what things are going to look like, much less. There's this one group of thought that says 7 generations ahead, like I don't know if that's a Native American thing or what it is, that they would live for 7 generations ahead, but heck, we can't even think of a half a generation. We can't even figure out how we're going to retire or what the end of our life's going to look like.
Yeah.
I don't see how we can really fool around.
Well, I think Bombay is a good example of what the world's going to look like.
Oh my.
Yeah. Swamiji says it's New York on acid.
Yeah. I just saw a film with the Dalai Lama, and I guess he's really talking a lot about population control. So then, I don't know, Europe seems to have it handled because they're all in negative growth. And I don't know what America is. But
Well,
I don't know if that
I
would
don't
take
know
hold.
either.
That's something we always gloss over and never really think of.
Well, I think people think about it. It's just how to stop it.
Yeah, we don't want to try to. Seems too
can't.
radical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so much to talk about, and then there's so much to really experience, experience and somehow diffuse all the falseness around each thing. Somehow you think that then true inquiry and true knowledge and true seeing can just happen by itself.
Well, each of us has to find, as I said, the thing they can do, because there's so many. If you look out at the world from a certain perspective and you see all the things that the world needs to heal itself, it seems impossible. And one person cannot do it. One politician cannot do it. But each of us can do what we can to contribute something positive. And I think that, if I was to look at the movement of my life from feeling impotent to discovering what I can do to contribute, that's a massive thing. In this one small part of the world, I can do what I can do to contribute to humanity. And I love to serve, after I awakened, that was all I wanted to do, was to say thank you. To say thank you to God, to say thank you to the Guru, to say thank you for a possibility like that, where my life could turn from being a dead thing to an alive thing. I was so grateful. And so I feel fortunate and blessed to have found the thing that I can do to make a contribution.
That's so important, to find what you can do. But then, it's in a context, and that context is, okay, we said inquiry and seeing things, seeing or knowing or seeing. But that seeing has to go one step farther, and that would be called expression. And then so many people don't know if expression is right for them. They feel like they need to have a private moment and be private and be isolated, that their peace comes in their isolations. And I don't know, as the last thing, maybe we should just talk about the importance of expression, because that's what you find. When you find something you can do, well, it's just taken for granted you're doing it, and that's your expression, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and also, it doesn't necessarily take the form that I thought it would. As a young person, you have dreams of how it might look, in the best case scenario for your life and for how you want to make a contribution. And it turns out like you couldn't have thought 20 years ago, right?
Not even 6.
No, okay, so there you go. So, there's a way of accepting and following an intuition about what you can do, and throwing away what you think you ought to do what you can do, and allow that to express itself. And there's a time for isolation. There's a time for people to be Swamiji talked about his time in Ganeshpuri, where he was isolated and cut off from the world. Well, I had a similar thing in my first 3 years in the ashram, which was in Ann Arbor. I hardly ever left the ashram. I was isolated to a certain extent, even though I was living in America. I was doing my practices and doing my sadhana very intensely. And so there's a period of isolation, which I think is healthy and good for everyone, but not as a way of life. Not as a way of life when people cut themselves off from engaging, with the outer world.
Well, they do it. Otherwise, how would that happen? That's how isolation happens, is by cutting off.
Yeah.
And then just to add one more comment, like how the heck are you going to find out what you can do? Well, it has to sprout from a seed, and that seed has to be yes. You have to try something.
You have to
right?
say yes to things, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to say yes.
And then one yes goes to another, and then that one's a dead end. Maybe you say, oh, I throw that one down, and then another, and that doesn't stop you from saying yes.
Yeah.
And somehow yeses get bigger and faster.
Yeah,
as you go on.
People get hurt, and so, as they live their lives, and this hurt builds up into this feeling of, I want to get away from people. Because if I'm not around people, I like to, when I teach, I like to say, there'd be no problem if there weren't any other people, right? Because it's relationships with people that seem to bring up the most pain and the most hurt. So if I just take myself out of relationship with all the people, then I'll be just fine, right?
I don't think so, but yeah, if you say so,
but a lot
I
of
don't
people think
very...
that. No, I'm just saying that a lot of people think that. And so, Australia is filled with people living in the bush by themselves, having withdrawn. There's lots of people out there who they call it going feral.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. We saw a bunch of them. We were up in the 10 Embassy with the Aborigines, but a bunch of people have outfitted vans, and they're just...
That's right.
They're migrants.
Yeah, but they find each other and hang out, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then they'll split off if there's a problem.
Right.
So then the issue becomes, well, how do I live with people and deal with the pain that arises in this space that's between two people or three people or a family? How do I keep that space open? It's a sacred space when two people sit down and have a conversation, and it is. But it gets contaminated. So then how do we keep that space free of contamination and free of hurt? And when hurt arises, then how do we make it clear again? So that's inquiry into getting rid of contraction, getting rid of the inner blocks. Because hurt creates a contraction.
Maybe that ought to be one of the 5 for Shiva, expression. Because you're created, you're
well,
maintained.
Creation is that, isn't it?
Well, that's an expression already, right?
Yeah.
But when you're created, you could express too. Because you're concealing and expressing. They're kind of the opposites.
That's right. That's right.
So is expression a part of the regimen here? I mean,
Yes,
people
well, I
have
mean,
to show up, right? In a way, they have to show up and be, so that's an expression right there. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, and facilitating people, it's a tantric approach actually to help a person discover the best in them and then to support them in manifesting the best that's in them.
right, making managers out of people and getting
Yeah, all
sadhana
of that,
done,
or
and then, hey, you're going to
helping
be
them
running
decide
this.
they want to be a
Yeah.
teacher or
You run this today, and they say, who, me?
yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. Baba was very good at it, and Swamiji's very good at it, putting the piece on the right square and helping them find the square that they should sit on.
So that it's enough challenging, but it's also something that you're really good at, or you maybe have a potential.
Exactly.
I would have never thought I had a potential for this. So then I wouldn't have even thought of that.
No,
Someone would put me here. I would have said, you're nuts.
Our real dharma comes from grace,
Right.
This is obviously your real dharma.
Yeah,
and by doing
sometimes I
it,
think I'm just being prepared. I don't know for what, though.
okay, well, you
But
never
anyhow,
know.
I'm getting capable for things. And,
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe it's just different venues and bigger venues, But somehow I feel like this has to roll out somewhere.
Yeah, you don't know. Somebody could discover you and say, hey, this guy's a great talk show. Let's get him on some show. You don't know.
No, I would go for it.
Of course you would. Did you see that moment Swamiji showed between Dave Letterman and David Duchovny?
No, I didn't see it.
You've got to look on YouTube for this moment, okay, where Duchovny talks about him being a seeker, and he went to a Buddhist meditation retreat, and this whole thing that happens between him and Dave. It's fantastic. You've got to see it. Just look for it. It's the only moment in the history of celebrity talk shows where anyone has talked about anything really spiritual.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah.
Somebody once said I look something like Letterman.
You do.
I thought I would dye my hair, wear a suit like him, and try to practice my accent, and then try to do some skits.
Yeah, it's true.
And then if I got good at them, maybe I could go on the Letterman show.
That's right. I think you should do it.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought that we need stand-up comics in spirituality.
Yes, there's a lot of good skits in that. Boy, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Devi Maru, I really thank you. Wow. Really nice to meet you. Nice to be in your home. I feel like I'm in your home and you're the mother,
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the whole ashram I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think we're blessed to have such great people to work with and to be with. And now you're one of those great people.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody's great. Just let us get our clutches on them, right?
Yes, that's right.
Come one, come all, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for staying with us and following us through Australia. And thanks for allowing your mind to be blown by all these wonderful people we're talking with. And keep it coming. And come to Australia. And it's the greatest. Your life will be transformed. So thank you.
Thank you.